sort of kind of return to the podcast sort of theme stuff, but on a different topic. I will apologise for there not being actual camera footage, but my OBS is, well, it's being its usual painful self. So you get a nice little picture of a bird today. Joining me on this first of hopefully a few different dyspraxia chats is, hang on, Charis. And I will just pass it on to this lovely guest for her to talk a bit about how she is related to the dyspraxia community and what she does.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to come on, Adam. So, I was diagnosed with dyspraxia when I was 18 at Nottingham-Trent University. But it wouldn't actually be the first time that dyspraxia was mentioned, because it was mentioned by a doctor at a party to my mother when I was about 6 or 7, I believe, somewhere between 5 and 7. But unfortunately, it wasn't actually followed through because nobody told my mother how to do that. So when I got the diagnosis of dyslexia with motor neuron dyspraxic tendencies at 18, it was something we were expecting. It was essentially the thing I'd gone after. But I didn't end up joining the community until I was 21, 22. So this would be in like 2020, 2021, which is obviously the pandemic. Because when you're diagnosed as an adult, I don't know if it's the same when you're a child, you're not told there's other people like you. They treat it as the end of the process when it's not. So I ended up finding the Dyspraxia Foundation, which unfortunately closed in April 2024, through a Google search in the pandemic. And I joined, and I basically straight away found it to be great and useful, and I suppose the piece that I was missing, because something that I'm very sure about and passionate about, I suppose, is that getting your diagnosis is one thing, but self-acceptance is a whole other thing. So you can self-accept whether you're diagnosed or not, and in some cases that's actually more important than the diagnosis itself. It's a journey only you can go on. It's something you need to do for yourself. This is something that I didn't really go on, as I mentioned, for 3 or 4 years. In 2022, I actually became a youth ambassador for the Dyspraxia Foundation, something I do for them until the foundation closed. In 2022, I also wrote an article for Red Brick newspaper, which is the University of Birmingham newspaper, where I was getting my master's in history of warfare, on dyspraxia. It was called We Are Dyspraxic and We Are Sick of Judgment. It was my story, but it was also the story of people from the community, as I asked people from the community to quote for it. This piece was actually nominated and shortlisted for the Student Publication Awards in 2022, but it didn't win, unfortunately, which I was quite upset by, because dyspraxia doesn't get that much awareness or support, and most people will say to you, I've never heard of it. Maybe you're just lazy. Maybe you're just not paying attention. Everybody's a little bit clumsy. These are the kind of things you often get said to you. So I was really hoping that that piece would win to raise more awareness, but the people who were included in the article said not to feel too bad about it, because all of those people would have read it from other universities, from the selecting committee, and that meant that more people were aware. And then I took a bit of a break because I wanted some time for myself after my master's degree. Then I ended up in 2024 joining the Dyspraxia magazine as an editor, but I'd been a long-term supporter of them. I'd supported them since 2021 when they formed. Writing, I've been in various editions of the magazine. And then in 2022 and 2024, I was nominated for probably about 14 different awards. Shortlisted a few times, didn't win anything except for the Matthew Hunt Award that was awarded in 2022 for services to the dyspraxic community under the age of 25 by the Sophie, who was the chair at the time of the Dyspraxia Foundation. And then last year, I really did quite a lot as well. So I attended online or in person various different organisations like the University Hospitals Trust Birmingham, Scope, City Year, to do talks about dyspraxia with them, which is something that I'm quite passionate about carrying on. In July, on July 23rd, I'll actually be speaking at the National Neurodiversity Show in Coventry about my experience as a dyspraxic, dyslexic and autistic female. That's something I'm really looking forward to because it's my first national show.
Yeah, that was it's quite incredible how much of that's only happened in pretty much the last couple of years.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, how do I get into advocacy? And I say, well, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to have patience and you need to start small. So look into your own sphere, professional, private, whatever, to see if there's anything you can access there. So, for example, I've spoken at the Persons of Disabilities Day learning session for City Year for 2 years in a row. And the reason I was invited to do that is because I actually went on the City Year programme. In 2021, I was a mentor for a year. So then they invited me to go on to that session, and I really enjoyed that. And I accessed the University Hospitals Trust Birmingham because something else I did for the foundation was I was a community organizer for them for a social group for adults with dyspraxia. I tried to carry it on after the foundation closed, but it's not really worked out. And that's where I met Paul, who is the co-chair of UHB, and he asked me to come in and speak. And then go on things like Instagram, go on things like LinkedIn, and speak about how you feel about it, and access things like the Dyspraxia magazine, because obviously it's a community-led magazine, and the motto is nothing about us without us. And if you start to access these things, then you can build from there.
I will be linking it in the description.
Thank you.
So you did touch on it with that last bit about advocacy, but I guess one of the center points of what this call was going to be about was the foundation closed last April. In what regard? Hang on, gotta try and get the words right. Where in your mind does the community go from here? Like, because I remember watching the bits in the Dyspraxia Awareness Week, and they were talking how there was a poll done only a couple of months after, and people were already noting that they were feeling like the awareness was slightly decreased after the foundation had closed, and that was only after a couple of months.
So if you watch any of the dyspraxia awareness videos, they were actually put on by us at the Dyspraxia magazine, because we felt that, as you mentioned, because there was a void, we didn't want the Dyspraxia Awareness Week to just disappear. So it's something the magazine has always been part of, but we really took charge of it and harnessed it to ensure that it would still exist, which led to 15 events being created on topics that people in the community wanted to know about, like lived-in experience and global panel talking about similarities or differences in different countries. Education was another panel that we put on.
That was that was one of the ones I caught. I think that was like one of the first ones in the week.
Yeah, Yeah, I was on one of the I was on the last one, so I was on the lived in experience panel. And we actually got 4.4k views in October across these 15 videos, which is obviously outstanding, something we're really quite proud of. But obviously outside of the magazine as well, there are plenty of advocates, people like the Black Dyspraxic, so to me, or you've got Athena on Instagram. Like there are quite a lot of advocates.
Yeah, Dyspraxic me out of London, and
yeah, Jess is lovely. I was on Jess's panel about sport and dyspraxia because I fence saber. Something we found after the foundation closed, and it would have still been apparent when the foundation was open, was it's not that there were no dyspraxia advocates, it's that it was fragmented. So what needed to happen, especially after the closure of the foundation, is these people needed to come together to work together, and this is something we are trying to do.
It runs a bit of a interesting sort of parallel with something I saw about creators, and an article talking about how creators continue through 2025 and with changes in aspects and everything and the markets and stuff. And the whole idea about it being focused on developing up the community or things like that, or this sort of idea of, well, again, yeah, community, that togetherness kind of aspect. And yeah, I guess that's sort of along the similar lines with the talk on basically trying to be less fragmented as a community.
Yeah, I suppose it is sort of, yeah. It's just that obviously in any sphere you can do a lot more together than you can do independently. And it's not that we're abandoning individual projects, we're still on them, but when you support each other, then you can obviously share each other's work on things like LinkedIn. You can be aware of each other, so you can recommend each other for obviously talks and things like that, and then you can put on things like panels, and then you'll have, let's say, 8 dyspraxia advocates who've all got their own angles and things, and then the community will really benefit from that. Like in my journey, if you like, particularly last year, Christabella Shaw and Toomey, the Black Dyspraxic, they were both really important in supporting me.
Yeah, because whilst this is the first sort of video-esque it's the first sort of thing like this I've done, but for several years now I've been trying to be fairly active on several of the mainly Facebook groups and everything, although I do know that I am also a part of, I don't think it is specifically dyspraxia, I think it's a wider neurodiverse group on LinkedIn and stuff like that, so I do try and post bits of bobs, and I do try and contribute.
Half a dozen or so dyspraxia groups on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, quite a few of them.
Yeah.
I admin 2 of them, so I admin I think it's Dyspraxic Help for You, the one that used to be owned by Billy Stanley. And then there's Dyspraxia Information and Community. I admin on that one as well. And there's like half a dozen others.
Yeah, I know there's many people, but I know in a couple of them, I don't know if I still am, but I did have the top contributor badge for a bit, so
yeah, I have in quite a few of them. Yeah.
So outside of social media, obviously social media is important and vital, but at the same time certain aspects of that are going through changes at the moment with everything going on in the world. So outside of social media, what sort of aspects and ideas are there to get the community working more in unison and maybe a bit less fragmented?
I suppose it's something that was still obviously going through and discovering. But obviously, there are 4 neurodiversity shows that I can think of. There's probably more. Going to things like this, I found, because I attended 2 of them last year, it really helps. Because then obviously you can access stalls and speakers, and you can meet other people like yourself if you wanted to. So obviously, as I mentioned, on July 23rd, I'm speaking at the National Neurodiversity Show, the Midlands one in Coventry. Dyspraxia Magazine is attending the Cardiff version of it, because there's actually 3 or 4, because it's the national one. We'll have a stall there as well. There's also the Neurodiversity Show also in May at the NEC. There's NADEX in March. I found shows like this, but I was new to them last year, are really good.
I remember, can't remember what post it was on, but it was quite a while back, because I'm based in the East Anglia area, and I remember someone saying that there used to be sort of because there used to be a group, and there used to also, when I was younger, there used to be a dyspraxia focused support area in a local place to me, but it closed years ago.
Yeah, a lot of them were put on by the Dyspraxia Foundation for volunteers who said that they either wanted to do an advice group or a social group. I believe I was the first one to want to do an adult social group. And they were going to use it as a model to have other groups, but obviously they closed.
Yeah.
The problem I have found with running one is support from the members, if you like. So people weren't showing up to things like online Zoom sessions, even though they said they wanted an online Zoom social and things like that. So I know that's why some of them closed. Obviously, also some of the advice ones will have closed because they haven't got the backing from the foundation anymore. I know from speaking to some of them that they do want to make it work in the future, but it's harder on your own.
Yeah, I think outside, because obviously a lot of the research and the findings that the foundation did, you can still access and find all of that, but the more almost subtle backing that the foundation gave to other advocates and groups, I think that's the bit that's going to be the tough bit to be able to I don't like using the word replace, because it's that is the word pretty much.
I definitely think we'll be okay as a community, because people originally, myself included, sort of thought, oh my gosh, what comes next? Nothing will be there, it will be a void. Dyspraxia Foundation was never the only thing that that cared about dyspraxia. It's just the only thing people knew of, and even then, not everybody knew about it. Because as I said, when I was diagnosed, they didn't say, "Oh, by the way, there's a foundation for people like you."
Yeah.
Because that would have been useful information.
Yeah, that was. It's just that challenge of, whilst they weren't the only one, the others just aren't as well known. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those areas and aspects where you've just got to keep building and everything. If you know of any that have specific pages or channels or that, I'll link them in the description as well. There's going to be quite a few links in the description.
And obviously, as you also mentioned, resources, the Dyspraxia Foundation resources are actually still online, and one of the places they are online is Dyspraxia Collective, which is something that I am also a part of. That was put on by, I think, 8 of us.
Yeah, yeah, because it was you. It was I'm trying to remember them, but pretty much the only two I do know of are you and Crystal.
Me, Crystal, Toomey, Jake. Um, I can't think of her name. But she is a researcher at the University of Surrey.
Mm.
She's part of it as well. And she put on.
Oh, was
I
she
think
was she one of the ones who did the Surrey event?
yes,
Yeah.
but names are not always my forte. Judith.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, because she put on, as you mentioned, the Surrey Awareness Day, and I was invited to that as well. And I was on the panel that spoke about dyspraxia and technology.
Mm.
And something that I mentioned was it's all fine and well to invent all this technology, but if society isn't accepting of it, then we won't use it anyway.
Yeah, that's the big issue. It's out of all the I have to admit, out of all the groups on Facebook and everything, I think one of the ones that has the most apt name for the reality of it is actually the first one I joined. It's the Embracing Dyspraxia group in a world. It's a really drawn out name, but it's that.
Yeah, yeah, I know the one.
Yeah. And
Because
that's.
it's ran by the people who made the book, and they're making a second book.
Ah, awesome.
But this book should be in print, like physically in print. The other one was online.
Hmm. Yeah,
I definitely know the group, yeah.
I mean, it is a sort of step by step process, but
Yes.
I,
I see, unfortunately, there's a lot of obviously outdated information. Things like boys are twice more likely to have dyspraxia than girls, and this just simply isn't true.
or the,
And it's
or,
something that I'm very passionate about
yeah,
trying to go after, essentially, to get rid of.
or the whole aspect of it being purely physical, which
Yeah.
is one of the ones that grinds my gears the most.
I find dyspraxia, even though I advocate and speak for it on a regular basis, very hard to quantify,
Yeah, yeah,
especially if I'm put on the spot. So when someone's like, "What's dyspraxia?" and I'm not just saying this because I'm part of the magazine, but Dyspraxia magazine has cards and it explains things like dyspraxia, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, uh,
when
and some others. And if someone asks me what dyspraxia is, I just can't quantify it, so I just give them the card.
yeah, I do the same. I still have my Dyspraxia Foundation card and I never really showed them the card precisely, but I took out the other flyer that had the longer list, and I
Yeah.
used to show them that. And
Even though I advocate for it, it's really hard to actually
yeah,
put it into words to what it is.
well, it's one of those. It was one of those just difficult things, especially trying to explain it in contents of when you're trying to ask for like support or something, or trying to get someone to understand it, and you're trying to you've got the parts that are physical that you don't always have to actually explain, but
Yeah.
you've got everything that happens behind the cover, and it's like
You'll probably find this very funny. So when I lived in Nottingham with my husband, but I think he was my boyfriend at this point, um, a friend of mine pulled him up, literally put him up the wall, and was like, "Why she got bruises on her?" And he was like, "She fell down the stairs and then walked into the table." And my friend was like, "Did she though?" And then fell down the stairs and walked into the table. And he was like, "Never mind."
yeah.
And when I lived at my parents' house, even though I lived there for 4 years and the bed was in the same place for 4 years, walked into the corner of it every day.
Oh yeah, I do that. I one of my worst ones is walking and just walking at the wrong angle and getting pockets caught on the door handles.
Yeah, I was always ripping pockets off of clothes. It's not fun.
I one of the and this is this is the difficult part. I know not everyone with dyspraxia obviously has this because it is a separate thing, but the the aspect of trying to advocate and push for the fact that it is more than just physical, whilst also having to highlight the hypermobility factor as well, if you have that.
A lot of people have HEDS, yeah.
Yeah, because
Actually,
I've got I was actually, was I diagnosed with hypermobility first? I think so, and then dyspraxia shortly after. But
most neurodiversities are comorbid. The most common comorbidity is ADHD or autism.
yeah.
You've also obviously got dyslexia, as you said, HEDS. And when you find one, you end up going down the path for others. So I'm diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia, but I'm also autistic. I just haven't got that diagnosis.
Yeah, I know that I've got maybe a couple of like crossover traits with ADHD, but that's more from the fact that some other close family members are like that as well.
Yeah, so it's learned behaviour, yeah. Sometimes the crossover is because it's in that spot where both do it.
Yeah.
But it's sitting down and working out, okay, which one is it?
And yeah, it's just I wish there was. Obviously, the card does sort of play this factor, but maybe this is something that could come with technology. I don't know, where you could just have like a pocket digital poster that could just highlight in like a mind map of everything it affects.
Yeah, that would be decent, yeah. Obviously, on the comorbidity front, ADHD, for example, has a 50% comorbidity rate with dyspraxia.
Yeah, autism's the odd one, isn't it? Because it's like it's. I remember reading somewhere where if you're where the likelihood is different depending on which way it is, which one gets found first. Like if you have the dyspraxia first, it's less likely, but if the autism's first, then it's. I remember reading that somewhere. I have no idea whether it's true or not.
I'm not too sure. I can't say I've read that study, but
It was
yeah.
it did mention that 50-50 with the ADHD as well. That's why I
Yeah.
gave it some credibility.
Autism is also said to be up to 50% comorbidity rate as well. But obviously, the problem with some studies is a lot of people aren't diagnosed, so it's harder to quantify. But based on the research they have, that's what they suggest.
It would be. It would be brilliant for, and obviously we're talking about dyspraxia here, but this is for all aspects of neurodiversity, where if each one had the sort of same amount of public awareness that autism does.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, that was one of the things they pointed out on one of the maybe it was the education panel, I can't remember, but they were talking about dyspraxia having an awareness week, whereas even ADHD and dyslexia both had like awareness months.
Yeah. And the word as well, though, like awareness. For other things, it's not awareness. The reason it's awareness for things, as she says, like dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and autism, is because people don't want to speak and acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a lot of people, I'm sure you've had it too, as I said earlier, say things like, but you're just lazy.
Yeah.
Everybody's a bit clumsy.
Yeah.
Just pay more attention. Or is that the movement version of dyspraxia? Dyslexia. And you're like, no.
I grew up with a best mate who we're still close mates now, and he has dyslexia. So that was always interesting when we were together, one person with dyslexia, one person with dyspraxia, and the amount of time.
Obviously, I've got both, and a lot of people say, are you sure you don't mean dyslexia? And you're like, yes, I know what I mean.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the things on like the sort of not the laziness but the untidy nature of it is that I have the really odd case where I can keep most areas really tidy except for the area that is like my area. Then
Oh, my
then
house is not clean. My house
then
is
then it just switches to this may look horrible to most people, but to me this is like a controlled chaos.
Yeah, my house is not tidy. Not at all. Not at all.
If there were we've touched on some of the more broader aspects, but if there were any sort of specific points about dyspraxia that you wish were had more awareness about them, are there any specifically? Obviously, that's maybe a bit
Well,
of
they
a
suggest that about 5% of the population have dyspraxia, with the figure somewhere between 3 and 10% because researchers disagree with each other.
yeah.
So that's something that I wish a lot of people knew, because then that means that that's not a small number.
No, it isn't. How many millions are there in the UK at the moment? Like, there's over 60.
Ow! Sorry, my cat's biting me.
Oh.
She's 8 months old.
Ah. um.
She's bored because I'm not paying attention to her, but she can deal with it. Apparently, there are 68.35 million people in the UK. That was the figure in 2023, so there'll be even more now.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's...
The 2025 figure is 69,551,332.
Brilliant.
There's a yearly change of 413,140.
Yeah, I think that's the scary aspect about all of it is that, like what you said, there's like at most, according to researchers, about 5% affected in the population. Yeah, but what about the percentage around the world where, and this is for me probably the part that honestly does scare me the most about it is that we're talking about having the advocacy and bringing the creators together, primarily mentioning the stuff around the UK. The UK is where it's most well known, and we're still talking about how there is still so much to do, and it's like, how does that branch out to the rest of the world?
Well, there's some really good researchers in this country. Johnny from University of Manchester is one of them. He did some work making videos for people to like tie their shoelaces and things like that. It's really good work. I can't think of what it's called, but I can find it. I think it's called Watch Me Do It or something like that. Yeah, Watch Me Do It, University of Manchester. Video libraries on how to do activities like tie your shoelaces. So I thought that was a really good piece of research.
Yeah, that sort of swings back to what we were saying earlier about like creators and the advocates starting small and starting in your essential bubbles and things. Is that
with research as well, they have to ensure that the dyspraxia community, one, can access this information, which is why Johnny published the website, because the research did really well with obviously the small group for his study, and he thought, well, how can this benefit everybody? So he published it. And another thing as well is if you're doing research, you have to ensure that the dyspraxia community are part of it and have a say in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Which historically hasn't necessarily been true.
Yeah, which is never brilliant. Like, that's one of the things that always sort of makes me a bit hesitant, is like, I mean, no discredit to medical personnel, doctors, nurses, and everything they do a tremendous job. But when it comes to things like this, especially with the research still ongoing, research changing, and all of these different things, is that on a personal level, I'm always more comfortable talking to someone in the community than I would be like a sort of medical professional about these aspects. I'm not trying to discredit going to them, it's just that's like the personal view, because there's a difference between studying and reading through these things and living with them every single day.
Oh, in the more recent years, there's absolutely been some great studies though, because they've included the community in it, and I don't just mean they're part of it, as in they're the subjects. Like, they've listened to them, and there've been some really good results for it.
Yeah.
Now, see, as we mentioned earlier, some of the outdated things that I'm not that keen on is, as I mentioned, things like boys are 2 times more likely to have dyspraxia than women. Well, girls. It's not really that true. And a lot of the women I know were diagnosed later on in their life, because a bit like autism or ADHD, dyspraxia was seen, I'm not sure if it still is, because obviously I'm 26 now, by schools and society and some parents as like a boy's disability, which is ridiculous, because disability doesn't have a gender.
No, it doesn't. That if there was one, it is one of those things in the world that does not discriminate.
No.
And I mean, there's, yeah, it's just, sorry, I've completely lost the train of thought. Yeah, on the personal level, I have it's not a massive group that I lead at like fun little game events and things like that, but a lot of them are overseas, and it's sort of started on that aspect of just trying to be able to bring the case of the dyspraxia forward, and it was one of the reassuring things where there were several people who I talked to about it overseas who still knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, which is really good, yeah.
And then they're not dyspraxic. Several of them aren't even neurodivergent, but they still knew, and that's the comforting aspect, especially when it's in the same world where there's people who believed that, or were led to believe that autism gave you COVID.
Oh,
God. Oh no, the COVID vaccine gave you autism. That was the line.
Yeah.
Which is.
But obviously, as you said, support from non-neurodivergent people is important as well, because obviously advocating for yourself is wonderful, but the problem is sometimes you're put in situations where you don't really want to, but you haven't really got a choice.
Yeah.
And the information is often better coming from the community, but we can't do it all ourselves. So support and understanding from non-neurodivergent people is important as well.
I think the other part of it, just talking about advocates as a whole, and it's something that you have touched on earlier, is that advocacy can be exhausting.
Yeah.
Like having to consistently and constantly not necessarily defend yourself, but try to explain a part of you that, well, you didn't exactly ask to have, is, but it's still there, it is still persistent, and it comes onto that part of accepting it, and
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, give advocates for things like this, like autism, like ADHD, give them a massive amount of credit, because yeah, it can be absolutely tiring.
Something I'm very keen on, though, is accessible figures. So, obviously, people like Richard Branson for dyslexia or Daniel Radcliffe for dyspraxia, good for them for achieving what they've achieved.
Yeah.
But you can't be Daniel Radcliffe or Richard Branson. You just can't. So, I'm not really keen when charities or organisations will push these people, because it's not attainable.
Yeah, yeah.
Show people like some of the people we've discussed, and because you can attain to that.
But the other aspect, and this is one that I strongly hold to, is that, and it goes on to the accepting part, is like, change the perspective. Like, so many people have turned around and like don't want to deal with things like dyspraxia or ADHD and that, because they outwardly demonize them, and it's like, no, there are a lot of actual positive aspects to them as well. Like, I mean, one of the ones for me, and it crosses the board between about like 3 of them at least, is the idea of your senses being sort of more attuned or things like that. Like, for me, it's my hearing, and yeah, that's a really circumstantial thing. In some cases, that can be a massive pain to deal with. In other factors, it can actually be a really good benefit to have.
we used to say that it take me 4 times as long to get something, but when I've got it, I've got it. And I cannot do that thing for a long time, and I can still do that thing if I decide to, pick it up and do it.
Yeah,
I didn't ride a bike for years, and then I got on one, and off I went.
Yeah, I mean,
but whereas obviously not neurotypical people, if they say use it or lose it, don't they?
Yeah.
Whereas I've found it would take me 4 times as long to learn it, but then I know how to do that thing basically forever.
Yeah, I mean,
like when I fenced saber, a lot of people in the community were commending that, and they were saying, well, I couldn't do that, and I wanted to put across the message of, like, you don't have to be good at something to do it. I'm a terrible saber fencer, but I really enjoy it. But then a lot of people jumped to my behalf then to say, oh, don't put yourself down, I'm sure you're good at it. You've never seen me fence. You don't know if I'm good or bad at it. Look online at my competitive results. I'm at the bottom of the table, or near the bottom of the table. Ergo, terrible at it. But I enjoy it. It's this commercialization and capitalism view that you have to do something because you're good at it, and you don't. If you enjoy the thing, do the thing.
I mean, I'm now an author and everything, but that was never really on the cards, and I always had that creative aspect, but I tried it with art, and my art was atrocious. I've tried it as much as I did enjoy it. I've tried it with other aspects and same sort of thing, but I mean, the amount of times in textiles I'm used to get the needle caught in like my own sleeve or something.
Sewing, yeah, I'm not good at sewing.
But I've grown up loving creative stuff like Lord of the Rings, other fantasy worlds, DC, and all of that, and I'm now lent into that, and it's not only a passion, but it's using that part that is arguably one of the most unique parts to a person in terms of their imagination. And I mean, I also really enjoy football. I was never good at it, but it was one of those things where
we'll probably agree slightly, but obviously I think you should still be able to access sport as a dyspraxic. So I used to do archery, and I wasn't any good at that. I used to do, obviously I said I fence, and I'm not any good at that. One thing I was very good at though was karate. I was like 10 years old and halfway to black belt. I could have got my black belt at 16, but I got bored and quit. But which made my sensei cry, but that's another thing. But you don't have to be, obviously, as I said, good at the sport to access the sport. But some people just don't understand it, because obviously dyspraxia isn't quantified by any sport out there as a disability. So I'm fencing fully able people. That's not going to go my way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying, so I don't really know where that goes, but one thing I was lucky to have was a coach who was understandable. So he understood when I couldn't do something and I wasn't accessing it versus when I couldn't be bothered to do the thing. And if it was that, he'd be like, no, you're going to do it. If I wasn't understanding it, he'd be like, it's fine, just leave it.
I remember there being one time in football, because to this day I cannot like head a ball in football, but I was still alright at aspects of it. But one of the highlight times for me was actually when it was a tackle that didn't go my way and I ended up falling over. And one of my friends rushed over to me because and so did the teacher, because they both honestly thought I had broken my leg. My leg was absolutely fine. It was my hand that was hurting because of the way I'd landed.
That reminded me of one particular fencing incident. So I tripped over my own feet, right?
Oh yeah, that's
because I was going forward relatively quickly because Saber, but I guess my brain was going and my feet were kind of going, but then I stopped and my feet just went smack.
Yeah.
Smacked my head on my friend's knee, smacked my head on the floor. And I was then sitting there apparently for about 2 minutes. Like, that wasn't fun.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I always picked up towards the end of doing football in school was just in PE. I wasn't part of the lunch or stuff like that, but it was the factor that it was one of those things that I ended up getting uniquely underestimated in aspects of it, because whilst my balance obviously wasn't the best and I couldn't header it or anything, I could still keep up with the fastest people in the class for a time and could still play catch up and things. And others, one of the ones that's always been one that I did for about over 10 years. I haven't done it since A levels, and then obviously COVID, which no one predicted, but was golf. And the whole aspect of doing golf was actually to try and help with the hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, my mum asked the doctor who I mentioned at the party, what do I do about her dyspraxia? And the doctor was just like, just make her do coordination things. They'll be hard, but it'll be better for her.
I used to be pretty alright at some things, but one of the odd issues was not being able to measure power, and it's one of the issues that I had in other things like badminton and tennis.
Yeah, when I used to do karate, I was sparring with my dad. I'd have been about 8-9 years old, and I punched him square in the face, and then he broke his nose.
Oh. Because I used to have the right amount of sort of power behind doing shots out of a bunker or little chip and run shots, but when it came to actually at the end and putting, I used to overshoot it all the time.
Yeah.
And
it's calculations, isn't it? Because I know there's lots of maths involved in golf. I don't really know anything about it.
But some of the other aspects, one of the most general ones, and this is across the board with neurodiversity, is empathy. And that's one of the, obviously you can have the case of being too empathetic, but for the most part it's one of the best aspects you can have in a community like this.
Well, each dyspraxic person obviously is different. So if you've met one dyspraxic person, you've met one dyspraxic person. So obviously, as you mentioned, empathy is something some people are good at. Creativity is something some people are good at. Perseverance is something some other people are good at.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lad out there, I think he's called Elliot. He drives racing cars, and he's very good at it. And then I've never even taken one driving lesson in my life and think it's a terrifying, prospect.
I mean, I went to I went to a school that with secondary and sixth form where this wasn't specifically to me. This was just as a school as the whole. Like, they had each school has the things like they focus on, like development or excellence or their little catchy slogans, and then they have the overarching aspect they focus on. The one I went to, ironically, was resilience, which was quite nice, really.
In one sense, perseverance, initiative, and resilience are good skills to have, and it's good we've learned them in some sense, but in another sense, we shouldn't have to have, because
there should be that
the people who are supposed to support us aren't.
Yeah. That's the aspect of, and this is like one of the simplest ways of probably putting it, is that, and it goes into that aspect that I know Crystal's touched on before, but in one of her older videos, but it's that case of when someone with dyspraxia says to you they can't do something, listen.
Yeah.
Don't just dismiss it as them not trying hard enough, because what you don't see is that they are trying.
But it could be, which a lot of people have pointed out, and I do agree as well, is maybe they just can't do that thing full stop. Just leave it be then.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a workaround around it, and then you can work it out.
The other
For
perspective.
Example, in fencing, I have 15-minute training sessions with the coach, because after that I am no longer interested. So it's things like working it around like that.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest aspects that I get, is that the people, and I mean, I was also brought up with like massive sort of like strategy type games and things like chess, and like all the different perspectives and angles, so that mentality's sort of stuck. But it's one that I still have to work on, remind myself of, but it's one of those things that, again, I obviously this is probably not going to be feasible, but I wish there was a way like you could visualize it, is that when we're looking at something and trying to process all things, just have a visual up of what's going on in our brains. And it's like, or just when you're trying not to do something, I mean,
I find it really hard to imagine things and things like that. So when I was at school, I learned fractions, for example, with Freddos. If I got the fraction right, I could eat the Freddo. And I also learned placeholder value with those blocks that stick together. Like, because I couldn't work it out in my head. But sometimes my husband will say things to me like, imagine if, and I'm like, why? Why would I want to do that?
The thing that got me in maths, and okay, granted, this isn't this isn't fully a dyspraxic thing, because in GCSE the grades we were the ones who had the grades just like switched to numbers and all of that. Like, we were the year group that happened to, and that was not fun. But in maths it was trigonometry, and people were sat with me and they were going through the sums, and the thing was, I was understanding the sums, but then they were putting the sums or the process into all of these massively worded questions.
Yeah.
And it was like the combination of English into maths, and it was like, what?
It took me 3 attempts to get a C in maths. My maths teacher, my sister's maths teacher, and a tutor. And every past paper on the known universe. But I did it.
The learning German was the interesting one, because I could still process, and I can still speak German, but in the actual exams and getting the writing correct, like where the words changed from where they are in English, it was just like, that was just...
Yeah, I tried to learn French as my GCSE. I got, I think it was an E. But that's also partially because I'm dyslexic, so you struggle to work it out. But in the speaking exam, I panicked and asked the teacher the question back, because obviously they said, use the question to answer. I just asked her the question. But she told me I should resit. And I turned around to her and says, I've got better things to do with my time. I was very, very, very cheeky and rude at 15, 16.
One of the ones that I always see pop up with dyspraxics is the whole aspect of the hand-eye coordination with gaming, and I remember how with consoles, with like the controllers like an Xbox or all of that.
Yeah, I play Xbox. I've been playing Fallout. And before that I've played Call of Duty, I've played Halo, stuff like that. My favourite is BioShock. But it's actually encourageable to play them because, as you said, the hand-to-eye coordination.
Yeah. And I remember like it growing and being able to develop and everything, and ironically a lot of similar games to you, Call of Duty, Halo and all of that. But then when it came to games that were more heavy on like button mashing and that just went horrible. But now I'm primarily a PC gamer, and I have to admit,
I didn't have games when I was a child, partially because we didn't have any money. So I started playing on the Xbox largely as an adult because my boyfriend and fiance, now husband, was into it. But it's actually really encourageable because it encourages you to use your hand-to-eye coordination, obviously in a controlled way.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, I am a PC gamer now, but I still find that benefit with the coordination and everything. Like, there's a lot of... And it also plays to the memory aspect as well, and touch typing as well, writing and all of that. Do a lot of touch typing, or try to. But it's also the factor because in a lot of games you have things like hotkeys or key bindings, and you can.
I don't tend to hotkey. I've got hotkeys in my Fallout game, but that's because my husband did it. I don't understand it or use them.
Honestly, it's one of the things that's quite nice to do and everything, but I have to admit the thing that has really become the nuisance for me when it comes to all of that is the development and the addition of the FN key.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is, just touching back onto the misconception stuff, and there's just a couple that are like some of the key ones, like one of the ones personally for hypermobility is that hypermobility is not a stepping stone to dyspraxia. It is its own separate thing. But
similar to dyslexia, they say that it can affect your intelligence, and you're like, it doesn't.
No,
you might not be able to access certain things, or you might need to access them another way.
Yeah, I mean,
but you're not stupider.
Yeah, the absolute bottom line of everything is that dyspraxia affects the way your brain processes information. It's not an intelligence aspect. There are things that I am downright bad at, and there are things that I am really good at.
But everybody has, and this is something I firmly believe in, an optimum working condition. So obviously, you can go through things like access to work, which I previously haven't done, partially because I've had some really good bosses, but also partially due to not thinking I needed it. But it's there for me, so next time I'm going to use it. But everybody has an optimum working condition, neurodivergent or not.
Yeah.
And if you let them access it, then you get better results, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, One of the funny ones for me is at the times, and this has happened a fair few times, where I've just gone into this sort of like hyper focus mode
Yeah.
in terms of writing and things like that, and then I've gone and seen my mum, and my mum's turned around and said, "It's like, what time did you go to bed? Because I look visibly exhausted, even though I feel absolutely fine."
Oh, I wouldn't sit and write my bachelor's dissertation because I was just struggling to access it.
Mm,
I'd done all the research. I'd spent like a year doing the research. I wouldn't sit and write it. So
yeah,
like 3 days before it was due in, I was made to sit down and write it, and I had to stay up for like 24 hours the day before it was due, finishing it. And I was sitting at the table going, I don't want to do this. And my husband was going, do you want to fail? And I was like, no. And he was like, do it then. Like, I got a low 2-1 on it. So.
I'm still banned from opening tins. Because the last time I tried to open a tin of tomatoes, I almost cut half my thumb off.
Oh no.
I and the worst part was no one was actually home with me, so I actually had to call my dad to come and help.
No. I find if I'm not interested in the subject, I don't want to know.
Mm.
Like, so I spent loads of time. I'm not sure if it's dyspraxia, my autism, my dyslexia, or a combination, really. But I spent like a week and a half doing my work on medieval England for my exam in my first year of my bachelor's. Sat down to do the exam. Couldn't remember anything.
Yeah.
So I didn't hold on to the information because I didn't want to.
Yeah, that's the thing. I took A level history, and I love history. It's incorporated into my writing. Is a lot of the genre of the games I do, and I explore all around. Like yesterday, I rewatched stuff on both Japanese and Korean history, but
Mm-hmm.
when it came to the actual school bases and what I associated in my head school with, when it came to just having so much history of like English A level history,
Tudors, right? Was it
focused
Tudors?
focused on things like Vietnam or the American West, and it's like I'm happy to explore those things in my own time, but like why are we learning about these as part of an English curriculum?
Yeah, I did Vietnam and I actually really enjoyed that. Did you
I
do Tudors? I
yeah,
did not like Tudors because
I
we did Elizabethan England, but we also did things like obviously then you've got things like the change of states and in the church and things like that, and there's lots of religious laws, and I would just look at it and go, what?
I took philosophy,
My
and
husband did philosophy.
I love the apps, and I will always absolutely praise my teacher for doing this. Um, at GCSE, we were meant to cover two of the Abrahamic religions together, and he
Mm-hmm.
changed it. He changed it around, so we ended up doing one Abrahamic and then Buddhism, and then using those as a comparison.
Okay.
And then he was warning us all the way throughout GCSE is like A level will be different, A level will be different, A level absolutely no religion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, when my husband did history and philosophy as his bachelor's, and he was sitting at the kitchen table once, and he didn't understand this um, philosophy.
mm,
I think it was Heidegger,
yeah, yeah,
and I just took one look at it and went, "Look at it this way," and he went, "Oh my gosh, you're right."
I
So
re-
sometimes being able to look at things from a different angle is actually good.
yeah, the other perspective and things. There was the one of the key parts of A level philosophy was the philosophy of mind, and that was Matrix Inception level brain breaking.
Oh, you don't know nothing if you haven't done philosophy of time. So I remember looking at his work, and I was just like, "What on earth is this?"
Like philosophy of time.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
that sounds fun.
his degree, one of his modules he did was philosophy of time, and it was just a whole mess. I think he got a first in that actually.
well, is there any other points you would like to cover or talk about?
Yeah, I
Like,
do think that maybe it's going in the right direction for neurodiversity, but it's going in the right direction very slowly. Because when I worked at a school in COVID, actually, so that would be like 2020, 2021, I worked with a couple of students who were neurodivergent, and the way they were treated by the school was outstanding. And the SEN department was really supportive of them. Like, that's one of the reasons I ended up accepting my own autism, because I was born in 1998, so in the 90s and the 2000s, autism was said to be a bad thing, particularly in girls. Like, and then I learned it wasn't. I wrote an article for the Dyspraxia magazine as well called "The History of Dyspraxia." It's on their website. I can send you a link to it.
I think I have read that.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was really informative and really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a bachelor's and a master's in history and history of warfare, and obviously I'm also passionate about dyspraxia, so
Yeah.
gave me a chance to make them meet effectively.
History is just just a general point to anyone who does see this or watch this. Learn from history.
Yeah, do absolutely do. But you'll be able to see in it, if you've read it, that the language towards dyspraxia changed, because they used to call them things like clumsy child syndrome, which is an absolute negative, whereas dyspraxia, it's got no positive or negative connotations. It's just a word, effectively.
Yeah, the worst,
that is
the
better.
The worst part about it is The worst part about it is just there's so many like words along that line. You've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia.
Yeah.
That's the one issue.
Because dyspraxia, as you'll know if you've read my article, the traits of dyspraxia are not new things, and the research of them is not new things, because you'll know that my article goes right back to the Greeks.
Yeah.
They didn't know what dyspraxia was, but they knew about the traits. And then research obviously also suggests that the first person to be diagnosed with dyspraxia was likely in the early 1900s. But dyspraxia as a term wasn't really used until 1980. Well, the 1980s, that period.
Yeah, that is one of the and it sort of goes on to that old name of like focusing on the child and everything. Is that things like dyspraxia, like autism, like ADHD, they don't like go away as you get older.
No, they absolutely don't. Like, it always used to make me laugh at university when every time I re-enrolled for my next year, there would be a question that I'd need to tick saying, basically, are you still disabled? Do you still need to support? I know the reason it's there is because you can be short-term disabled.
Yeah.
But it always used to make me laugh.
And also, just throwing this out here to anyone who listens, because I have had so many debates with people over these things. No form of neurodiversity has a cure because it is not a disease.
No, absolutely. It's a lifelong thing, and it doesn't really need to be cured. You just need help to access it.
Yeah.
But obviously you can go through things like short-term bouts of depression, and they're classified as a disability, but that's short-term.
Yeah, that's one of the the self-esteem aspect of all of it, and that's again that brings it around to why it's not only important for the person themselves to be able to accept it as a part of them, but it's also important for the people around them to do that as well.
Yeah, somebody asked my husband, this was about autism actually, not dyspraxia, but it's still relevant there. If you could get rid of her autism, would you? And he was like, absolutely not.
Yeah, I've had people turn around and say that. I had one person turn around and say to me that if there was a cure for dyspraxia, they'd pass it on to me, and I turned around and said I wouldn't take it.
Yep. But they actually reckon that some neurodiverse, this was autism research, but I believe it might be relevant to other things, were actually originally, when we were Neanderthals, a evolutionary advantage.
Yeah, and I there I know for a fact that there are still people, and I'm sure you do as well, who still argue for that now.
I've never, ever, ever liked the term superpower.
No,
Dyspraxia is not my superpower.
no.
It's not. Neither is dyslexia, neither is autism. That trivializes it.
Yeah. It I think it's a sort of way of looking at it is like it's a nice almost inspiration for that sort of stuff. Like when people are thinking, it's like, oh, maybe this could work as like a concept or something. But no, they in themselves are not superpowers.
No. And what some people want is inspiration porn, and you're like, I'm not your disability inspiration porn. You don't need to do the little sad eyes at me and say, good for you, despite your dyspraxia. Like, that's patronizing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, normally it's applied to like Pinterest or Instagram, but I saw a comedian online and they mentioned it, and I do actually agree with it.
Mm.
While I think you should have accessible figures that you can reach, like obviously podcast hosts or some of the people we've discussed previously, like having them is great for the community because it's a figure they can actually access. But I don't believe in using us, as I said, in an inspirational porn way. We're not figures to go on a shelf.
Yeah, it's like this is something that's actually come out from doing the being an author, doing that side of the writing, is that I've already inspired people I know to go into the creative side of things, not just writing, but like film and all of that. And I'm sat back here thinking, that's really nice to hear. That was never my intention.
Oh no, I absolutely love to hear when people say things like, you know, for example, seeing you fence make me want to access, let's say, for example, football. And I'm like, I'm really glad to hear that. I really, really am. But something a lot of people aren't prepared for is when you open yourself up and put yourself in that advocacy space, everybody wants a piece of you, so you have to learn to draw your boundaries and say no.
Yeah, the other part of it is like people are like the advocates, and that we're trying to just broaden and like make these areas, these topics, more public knowledge and things like that. If you're inspired by like what's said and everything like that, brilliant, awesome. But still strive to be yourself. Don't strive to be someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's only one you. I don't like when people say you're one in a million, because that means there's like 5 of you.
Yeah.
There's only one you is a better thing to say.
God, 5 for me in the UK, that would be terrifying. Right. Well,
people mean well when they say it, but
yeah. Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining. If there are any links you want me to stick in the video description, please, be sure to pass them on.
Yeah, will do.
And when it's uploaded and everything, I will link you the video, obviously.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, hopefully this is the start of a few different videos like this. I've already said in other updates on YouTube and Twitch that this isn't going to be like a set thing. It'll be every now and then, but because I've already got a lot of different aspects on my channel. So this will just be... And that way, if they're a bit more fewer and far between, it means there's more, like... It doesn't almost drown out the topic by oversaturating it.
Yeah, thank you for asking me and having me on, Adam. I'll definitely have a look at some of your other work as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I genuinely thought the call had crashed for a second there. But yeah, so I'll end the recording now once my mouse wakes up. So, for those of you on YouTube who have seen this, please do check out all the links in the description. Obviously, there will be more than usual here. And yeah, please also do share with others and just help spread it out a little bit. And cheerio.